Hey, what's up? This is the Intricately Woven Podcast, and I'm Rachel Cancino-Neal, health restoration coach and nutritional therapy practitioner in training. I'm here with my husband, Derek Neal. There he is, to talk about the power of perception. Here's the question. Can your perception of life be impacting your physical health?
Ooh.
Intriguing, right?
It is.
All right, you ready to find out?
Let's do this.
All right, let's go. Okay, before we totally jump into today's episode, I want to remind us of where we've been. Okay? We're going to do like a little review. In each episode, I'm going to try to insert this because I really do want the listeners, all of you, to take away something that you can apply to your own life. Okay? So we're going to do that is making sure we reviewed. So last time we talked about, do you remember what we talked about, Derek?
You painted a pretty picture of a tree.
I did. You did remember the tree analogy, right?
Yeah.
So the tree analogy, I referred to the nervous system and how the brain impacts digestion, right? And we can be in a fight or flight state or rest and digest. When we're wanting to get the most from our food, it is important to be in the rest and digest state to get the full benefits of what we're eating, right? And so that tree analogy, do you remember like what the leaves represented in that analogy?
Your brain.
Your brain, and then you have the trunk of the tree, which reminds us of what?
Spinal cord.
And then the roots
Would be your peripheral nervous system.
Your peripheral nervous system. That is a
hard one for me to get out.
That's a hard one, period. So we talked about these things to remind you of how everything is connected, and there is a direct connection, if you remember, from the brain to the digestive organs through the vagus nerve, right? And so that vagus nerve is the main carrier of these rest and digest impulses. All right?
All right.
So we're clear there. We good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask a question, though?
Oh, yeah.
I don't really feel stressed most of the time.
Okay. So you're referring to that whole like rest and digest versus fight or flight?
Yeah.
Okay.
So since I don't feel stressed most of the time, does that mean that I don't ever get into that fight or flight mode?
Mm-hmm.
Or is my brain able to respond without me really knowing it?
Okay. So you're trying to get at the idea, if I don't know if I'm stressed, if I'm not aware of it, am I really stressed? So therefore, in the digestion talk, does that really impact my digestion?
Right.
All right. Well, let's dig into that and what I'm calling our coffee shop talk. Coffee shop talk is my idea of how I'll be having conversations with everyday people about how the body works and putting it in a language that they can understand. So we're gonna pretend right now that we're drinking a steamy hot cup of coffee while we have this conversation. You ready?
All right.
Okay. All right. So to get a good idea, so your question was, if I don't know that I'm in fight or flight, am I really in fight or flight? Or can the brain still be reacting without me really, like your nervous system really, can it be reacting without me knowing it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think the greatest story to tell to help everybody understand this is our Memphis story. Remember that one?
Yes, I remember the one where you thought I was going to get shanked.
Yeah. You're pretty lucky that you didn't. Okay. So I think we should tell that story.
I guess so.
Okay. All right. Maybe we'll give context first, though, of like what your background, your family life, and your environment was compared to what mine was.
It probably plays a role.
Okay. So you're gonna start us off to tell us, Derek, who are you?
Well, that's very deep,
Yeah.
So maybe let's just talk about my family and my upbringing.
Okay.
So I grew up in a small rural community where you know everybody in town, which is pretty cool. And my home life with my parents and my sister was pretty calm, very stress-free for the most part. So overall, my stress level was very low.
Okay. All right. So calm, serene, rural life.
Country living.
Country living. All right. Well, let's just dive into my opposite world. I grew up in the inner city of Phoenix, Arizona. And I don't know if anybody else like talks like this, but like, or like makes this reference, but I see Phoenix as like different levels. It has like different levels of ghetto. And I was like level 1 to 2 depending on the season. And so majority of my life I grew up there from like birth in this like level 1, level 2 ghetto from like birth all the way up until I moved away for college at 18 years old. So this environment involved gang violence, prostitutes, drug dealers, shootings, stabbings, including even when I was at church. I remember there was a couple of people that had been stabbed in the back of our church, like out in the back outside, and my church was like it was like a 10-minute walk or something. So that was like the neighborhood. And then I did not have a calm family. Lots of anger, lots of reactive kind of behaviors, it's a little chaotic there, a little chaotic. Has some good memories still. It's not all bad, but I was just around a lot of like craziness. And there's some rules of the ghetto. 1, you don't make eye contact with people. 2, you really shouldn't go out at night because that's just asking for trouble. You're supposed to be like hyper aware of your surroundings to see like if somebody's coming towards you. You need to go like either opposite direction, across the street, some way to get away from that person because you just don't know what that person's going to do to you. So a lot of hyper awareness of like around you, so that basically you don't get shanked. And that shanking is a great transition into our Memphis story. So, do you want to create the picture of what it was like, or should I do that?
I think you should start it off.
Okay. Imagine, folks, it's a dark, dark night. Okay, maybe it wasn't that dark. I think it was dark. Derek doesn't think it was as dark as I remember it. But we were in Memphis for a mattress convention, and that is not code for anything. We were truly in Memphis to learn about mattresses because we were both selling them. And it was a riveting time. It was honestly just really interesting. And so we were taking advantage of the location, and we were like, hey, let's go check out the Blue Strip. And so we went down there. It was really cool. A lot of fun things, a lot of cool, bars. And we went to the BB King. I can't remember the name of his club, though. We went in there, listened to music, and then finally like, all right, well, let's go back to the hotel. So we just were going to walk back, and that's what we did. So we start, folks, on this dark, dark road, away from all the lights and the shining glitter of hope, into this darkened path. And there a man that both my husband and I notice. Derek, you talk about what you notice about this man before I tell like the facts of what was actually happening.
Well, first, it wasn't that dark. There were street lights. And we were in downtown Memphis, so it couldn't be that dark. But this gentleman was walking the streets at night, just as we were. So he had some dirty clothes, some ripped pants, but it wasn't like he looked crazy or anything. And so
I will give you that. He didn't look crazy. I do agree with that. He just looked shady.
Yeah. So we walked by. He wanted to introduce himself.
I'm going to interject. I have coached Derek before this time. I had coached him, Derek, in the ghetto. Don't make eye contact. This is the strategy I've always used. My sister actually has a different strategy. She just stares people down in their eyes and then like, hey, I see you there. So she has a totally different approach. My approach has always been head down, don't bother anybody. So Derek took more of the, hey, I'm going to look directly at you. Hello, sir.
And smile and extend my hand to shake.
And when he's doing this,
you're about to lose it.
Yeah. But your nervous system, what was going on in your nervous system?
Nothing.
Yeah. He was
pretty calm.
Yeah. Mine was screaming at me. I am not joking when I say I was ready for him to be shanked. I was ready for it. It didn't happen. He is still alive today. He got to have a good handshake and probably extend the Lord's love to somebody. Well, I'm thinking this man's going to murder us. So there's that, But really, we tell the story because, there was totally different responses between us, right?
Yeah. Why did you respond so differently than I did?
Well, if we go back, Derek, to our upbringings. I think that really sets the stage. And this really does go back to your question of like, can I be in a fight or flight without really being aware of it? Well, yes. Your experiences throughout life, this actually goes all the way back to when you're in your mother's womb, that your nervous system is already being geared up, right? And so your body's already receiving information and how to respond to different things. And sometimes you'll say, oh, it's like a reflex, it's an instinct. It was my reflex and instinct to be on high alert against this guy, right? Not because of anything he necessarily did, but because he was familiar to me. So when my experience said, ooh, danger, danger, while yours said, we're good. So like every day our bodies are getting this information, and our bodies, like our nervous system is constantly responding to that, either in a danger, I need to respond, or not danger, I'm okay.
I get that. But does that mean that all the information I am seeing, hearing, and sensing, does it all get to my brain?
Oh, that's good. Okay, so let's reflect real quick. So the brain is a part of the nervous system. So I'm kind of using these terms interchangeably, right? So I keep referring to the nervous system and the brain. So brain is the part of the central nervous system. Okay, so yeah, every day, all day, our bodies are receiving this information. Most will be filtered out. So if the information is like boring to your body, I've done this a million times, whatever. You know, your brain stem, like the gatekeeper for the rest of the brain, that says, you don't have to worry about it, brain. Rest of the body, you're fine. Don't worry about it. And so you're not even aware necessarily of it because your nervous system has said, this is not of importance to me. But if the information that your peripheral is getting, your sensory organs and all these things, if those are getting something that's unusual or significant or dangerous, then your whole brain is being aroused to it, and all of a sudden you're gonna have this different response. And that emotional side of you is going to start getting ready. So when I say emotional side, there's a particular area we'll talk about in a moment that like responds to a dangerous situation, that fight or flight. So your perception of that guy was what?
Just an everyday guy.
Just an everyday guy. My perception was danger. Your body was able to stay calm. You registered that he was there, but because it was unusual. But after some communication in your brain and the rest of your nervous system, it was like, it's okay. I had a different response to that.
Okay, so let me just kind of reframe that in my terminology just to make sure that I understand.
Okay.
So based off of my experiences, since I grew up in a small community where you talk to everybody on the street, I didn't see this individual as a threat. But because of your experiences, anybody you saw on the street, you just assumed they were a threat.
Not anybody. There's definitely a certain way. So like for him, he looked like a homeless guy. In my hood, that was something that you need to be wary of, right?
So more it was at night.
Yes.
It was potentially in a rougher neighborhood.
Right.
Some of these other things that would...
We were out of the safety of the lights and the people.
Yeah, create a reaction to you.
Yes.
It was familiar to what you grew up in.
Yeah.
Okay, so then that's why you perceived it as a much more dangerous situation than I did.
I mean, I wouldn't even think my thinking side of my brain would have said, this is a dangerous situation. It was that emotional side again. It was just, oh shoot, this is really familiar. I need to get all my ghetto skills back out so I can respond so that I don't die.
Got it.
Okay. All right. So to help us understand this even more, we're going to have a bit of a nerd out moment. Is that cool?
Yep.
All right.
Sounds good.
So we're going to look at some like technical words to maybe help you. And the point of giving you more technical words, not just you, Derek, but you audience technical words, is so that when you are researching things, like if you do have health issues, if you can learn some technical words, you can research so much better, because there are certain things it's like you really have to know the lingo in order for the right kind of research to pop up. I'm going to go ahead and say sorry right now because we record in our bedroom, and our cat like lives in our bedroom, so you might hear some meowing. This is real life, folks. Real life.
Real life.
Okay, so I'm going to give you some technical ideas that if you want to further research later on, you can be able to do that. All right, you ready to do this?
Let's go.
Okay, so I love using like visuals, but obviously I'm just using my voice for this thing. So I'm going to try to create this visual for you. Okay. All right, so if you're listening to this, hold up your hand, make the number 4, and now wrap those 4 fingers that are still sticking up over the thumb. So when you're looking at it, your thumb should be tucked in with your 4 fingers over it. When you're looking at the thumb area, we're going to remember that that is the emotional brain. That represents emotional brain. The fingers that are up top are called our thinking brain. Okay? And then at the wrist, you have your brainstem. So I already kind of mentioned brainstem is like the gatekeeper of information for the rest of the brain. Okay? And if we're looking at our forearm, think of that as your spinal cord. And this is constantly receiving information. Your nervous system is always interacting with your environment. Okay, it's always receiving this information. And your emotional brain is highly responsive to these things of alerting dangerous situations. So it's constantly like evaluating and all this. But your thinking brain and your brainstem can work together to filter out some of that stuff. Okay, so if it's not an immediate danger or it's not igniting your amygdala, so that's a part of your emotional brain. If that amygdala isn't saying danger, 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 then you have more of a chance to disregard whatever that is. So like for you saw the man, you acknowledge. So there was kind of an emotional thing at first. And then after that, you're like, this is not dangerous. You had a chance to evaluate the situation. Not dangerous, so you're fine. Right?
Right.
Okay, so that in that brainstem, there's a thing, this formation called, are you ready for it?
I'm ready.
Reticular formation.
Reticular formation.
Okay, yes. So reticular formation is this gatekeeper for whole brain arousal. So the reticular formation, that brainstem, reaches down to the spinal cord, but it also reaches up into the hypothalamus, the cerebellum, and thalamus. So essentially that reticular formation is interacting with the peripheral through the spinal cord, but it's also going to, let me backtrack that. The spinal cord is a part of the central nervous system, not the peripheral, but the information that is being sent out and received will go through the spinal cord, just so we're understanding. Okay? So that reaches down into the spinal cord, and then it also reaches up into both the thinking brain and the emotional brain. So essentially, like everything is impacted by this reticular formation. Okay? So that means that your movements, so how you move your body, how well you can balance, your intellect, your emotions, your memory, and even your sleep patterns are all impacted within that reticular formation. And inside of that, there's another thing called reticular activating system. So I've read this book called Smart Moves.
Oh, Smart Moves.
Oh, man. If you want to really learn about the nervous system, the whole title of the book is Smart Moves, Why Learning is Not All in Your Head. And I picked up that book mostly as as like an educator. How can I get people to understand things better? Dr. Carla Hannaford does such an amazing job with just incorporating so many different things about what can impact learning, but she really focuses on the nervous system. So I learned a lot from her book. But she says this: emotion, body, and reason are physiologically inseparable because of this connection with the reticular formation. Okay? So RAS, or the reticular activating system, that's within the reticular formation. Okay? It works with that thinking side of the brain to filter out 99% of the information that your body is sensing. Wow. So again, your nervous system is constantly sensing, but you only become consciously aware of something when it's like a dangerous situation or something like you're really focusing on, or where you're putting effort into the learning. You can become where your brain becomes almost like hyperactive. Where you have it where I can't focus on anything, or like I don't even know what I think about. My thoughts are like floating. I don't even know what's going on anymore. That can be that you just it could be that you've been under chronic stress for a while. So that starts to negatively impact the RAS, or the reticular activating system.
What do you mean by that, chronic stress?
So that can be like anything. So chronic stress can be either mental or physical. Okay, so anything that's going to be switching your body over to that fight or flight, whether or not your brain realizes it. So going back to that question you asked before, you could be reacting to stress and not have conscious awareness of it.
Okay.
So like for you, when you are in a stressful state where like you're mentally stressed because of work or whatever, you don't really know consciously that you're under stress, but your whole body language completely shifts. So your nervous system is fully aware that you are stressed, even though you're not consciously aware of it.
Okay.
Okay. The other things that actually start impacting it is abuse and neglect or traumatic events, especially when if a traumatic event is repetitive or it goes undealt with. Okay. Chronic infections, allergies, whether it's food or environmental or like seasonal, whatever, those things can start impacting the function of RAS. And all of these things, if that starts to happen, okay, if RAS starts to like change its function, then you can become more hyperactive. I've already mentioned that, but also you're going to start making that emotional brain way more active than your thinking brain. When emotional brain starts to heighten and becomes more dominant than the thinking brain, that's when you really start losing self-awareness. So again, I don't even know what I'm thinking about. Where am I at? What is my body even feeling? I don't even know. These are the things that can start happening under a chronic stress, whether it's physical or mental.
Okay.
Okay.
So RAS is pretty important.
Oh, yes. Yeah. It is very important, and I think it's just super interesting that all of these things, going back to that quote from Dr. Carla Hannaford, that emotion, body, and reason are physiologically inseparable. That means they all have a tight relationship together, that you have to pay attention to all three.
Here's another question for you.
Okay.
If RAS works with the thinking brain to filter out 99% of information, and chronic stress, mental or physical, can make it not work as well, then would you say that RAS can impact the rest of my body?
Oh, yeah, totally. And this is where that whole... there's like several layers to this question, but if you're talking about like the perception, if we're just focusing on perception, because perception of life starts impacting what gets filtered out and what comes in. So going back to our example of Memphis, from your perception, there was nothing wrong because in your experience, there was nothing wrong. Yeah, a strange man was coming toward us, but you thought, you didn't actually consciously think it, but your action showed this is fine. I feel safe. He feels safe to me. I'm going to shake his hand. And my experience shifted my perception of this man who did nothing wrong to me, but he was in an unfamiliar place. I'd never been to this place before. So it was dark. There was too many things that was outside of comfort zone for me to make me feel safe. Right? And so my perception of the situation was dangerous. Okay? So this is where RAS comes in, where you're able to filter out you're fine, nothing alert. I was alerted highly, and RAS and that fight or flight response works hand in hand together. So for me, I was getting a lot more of arousal than you were. Okay? So this is another quote from Dr. Carla Hannaford that I thought was so great. And again, this is in the book Smart Moves. And I really encourage you to read it if you want to learn more about the nervous system and all the things that can impact. This is what she says in the book. The way we choose to perceive an event, colored by our emotions, determines our response to it and our potential for learning from it. At least 8% of what we perceive in our lives takes shape in our minds. Dependent on where we focus our attention, we can change reality by changing what we focus on and pay attention to. I think that's wild.
That is really interesting.
You can change, according to what she quoted, or what she said here, we can change our reality by changing what we focus and pay attention to.
So, what actually happens if I focus on the negative? Or, let me put it a different way. If I perceive a situation to be threatening, rather than an adventure.
Okay. Or rather, even just like for you, like a safe moment where I can shake this man's hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you're perceiving it as threatening, then your nervous system responds to it by sending out the appropriate neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters are like the way your nervous system communicates. So if you're feeling like a threatening situation is coming, you're going to send out adrenaline and noradrenaline. Okay. These are both there to help get you ready to fight or flight. Okay, so you get this pump of energy basically. Now, if you feel like this is a fine moment, no big deal, I notice, not a big deal, but I can see this like an adventure, or potentially I can have this really positive interaction with somebody, cool. You might get hit with a dopamine kick, like that feel-good hormone. You might feel actually like kind of happy afterwards, like, oh, that was a really nice interaction. So for like you, it might be like, oh yeah, that was no big deal, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what did you just do? And you're saying, what's the big deal? Right?
Yeah.
And that is very much how a relationship works. I'm like, Derek, what were you thinking? It was fine. It's fine. No big deal. Yeah. So a simple shift in perception will change the way your heart responds, your lungs, your muscles, your blood vessels, and digestion, because all of these things respond to an adrenaline pump or that dopamine kick, right? So you need to be, it's really interesting if you just kind of pause and see what happens when you're perceiving something as threatening, and just, if you can, take a pause and notice the reactions that are actually happening inside your body. We have a real life, in the moment example of such stress occurring. Derek. So Derek was to introduce the next part of this, and I kind of was like, oh,
you
hey,
changed it on me.
I changed it on him, and my husband,
when it comes to words, I struggle. So it's
You
amazing that I'm doing a podcast. Let me just put that in here.
and what's so great is that I'm so calm, and this is what's, I think this is perfect for right now, because I feel completely fine. I'm getting like a dopamine. I think this thing is such an adventure and so fun. Derek, in this moment,
Threatening. I feel like I'm walking down a dark alley.
So folks, we are getting to witness. I don't know if you can hear the change of his voice, but man, if you could see him, you would see a whole body change right now. So let's say like you've had experiences like me, where you either came from abuse or trauma or chaos, your environment was unsafe for whatever reasons, or you just experienced like chronic stress, or your perception, you tend toward everything is a threat and nothing is necessarily adventure or a calming or a fun experience. So what can you do? Okay, so some of these ideas, this particular idea did come from, again, Smart Moves. She introduces this concept called brain gym that I had never heard of. But one of the things that you can do is, Derek, do you know where your collarbone is at?
Yeah, I got that.
Okay, so if you don't know what that is, you can Google it. It'd be easier than me to try to describe it. So we have a collarbone. I want you to put your fingers, you can put like your middle finger and your thumb on your collarbone. Then you're going to slide your hand down and like right underneath. And it kind of should just kind of like plop down there. And there should be a soft part right there where you kind of feel like muscles. And do you feel that softness?
Yeah.
Okay. With the other hand, you're going to put that onto your belly and put one finger in your belly button. And you're going to massage both those areas. And this will help to interact with what's called your vestibular system, which is the balancing system. So you're creating this interaction, and that helps also to activate RAS in like a healthy way. You can also practice just balancing. So we have a wobble board in our home for really, if we just put it out, any person coming to our home is getting on that thing to see what they can do. But I use it. I educate our boys at home. And so I use it usually before we start lessons. And it is amazing how much better the brain works, because you're activating that RAS and it's getting the whole brain ready for learning and an experience. So it can also retrain it of how to interact with around you. Okay? Do you need to get the wobble board out right now, Derek?
I was actually just thinking that.
To get himself just calmed down. Okay. The other thing, if you are in a hyper aroused state, so Derek, you might practice this right now. When your brain is like having a hard time just like anchoring in to like where you're at, what you're doing, you can do what's called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding method. And actually my counselor is the one who introduced me to this. So what you do is you pause, get comfortable, whether it's if you're able to sit, you can sit down. If you're lying down, you can do that. But you just want to be comfortable. And you're going to find 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can feel, so you can feel like your breath, your heartbeat. You can find like, material to feel. So 4 things to feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. The point of all that is to help your brain and your nervous system come to a point of realizing where you're at in that moment, especially if your brain, like if your thoughts are out of control, to get yourself grounded to that moment right then. Okay. If you have just lost a lot of awareness, and let's say, you're trying, in the last episode I talked about breathing, good breathing, like I don't remember if I mentioned diaphragmatic breathing, but where you breathe into more your diaphragm and you have this whole 360 experience. For some people, you're chronically in a stressful state where you're breathing into your chest and you cannot for the life of you get that diaphragm to activate. You've lost some connection then. So you need to reactivate that area. So this was a recommendation from a book called Waking the Tiger. The longer title I think is like Healing from Trauma. Really interesting read. But in that book, Peter Levine, I'm not sure how to say his last name, but he gives a recommendation of getting a pulsing shower head and taking a pulsing shower. And what you do is that you 10 minutes a day, you stand underneath the shower head and you let the water hit all areas of your body. And whatever area you're on, you say that area. So like if the shower head is pulsing and it's hitting your head, you think, this is my head, this is my head, this is my head, this is my head. If you have lost sensation where you can't get your diaphragm to activate, you can do the shower, or you can just tap that area and say it. This is my diaphragm, this is my diaphragm, to get your brain to activate those nerves that are in there and to get the communication going again. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, but do we have to do all of these?
Okay, well, I mean, you can choose whatever one is best, like, suiting for your situation. So, like, if you do notice that your brain, like, your mind is just racing and you can't get control of your thoughts, well, doing the grounding practice might be really good for you. If you do struggle with, like, balance or muscle control and struggling with focus, well, your RAS might be having a really hard time. And so doing those braid buttons or balancing exercises, either doing a wobble board or doing yoga or just standing on one foot and see how well you can do that, to activate that balancing system. If you do try one of them, comment and let me know if that did anything for you. All right. I think we went over the goal time, but Derek, is there any final words of wisdom that you want to bestow upon our listeners?
I don't know that they're words of wisdom, but I think your title for this, The Power of Perception, fits very nicely.
Oh, it's true. It's true. I do a good job. All right. So, I'm excited because I have a really clear vision for the next 5 episodes. Can I share my vision?
Sure. Let's do it.
So for the next 5 episodes, I'm going to talk about how to keep your tree healthy. Get it?
The tree. The tree.
The tree made it back. The tree. Okay, I thought that was so witty, okay? So we're going to look at different things that can impact the nervous system and how are you going to keep that healthy. Okay, so we are going to go a little bit more into trauma and loss of self-awareness. We're going to talk about the influence of mindsets, beliefs, and neural pathways. Okay, that sounds super fancy, right? Why chiropractic care can actually be an important part of taking care of your nervous system. And then we're going to talk about also how to nourish. So what kind of foods can help support your nervous system. And then finally, Derek and I will be sharing more about our life as we look into the final episode, which is a biblical perspective and how that can positively impact the nervous system. So I'm excited about all of it. I think it's going to be really great, and yeah. So I really hope that you come back and hear all these different ideas, and hopefully, more than that, walk away with something that's going to be helpful to you. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Derek.
And we are hoping to help you put the pieces of your health together. Talk to you later.